Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, ants in our portal pants. Will there be any relief coming up around the corner? And also, what could 99 days do for an AC joint? We investigate next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you again, wrapping up the week, diving on into the weekend. And if you did not know, we are now within 100 days, less than 99 to go until Red Raider football kickoff. We'll wrap up our conversation looking ahead to what is to come over those 99 days. And what would another 99 do for a shoulder, for an AC joint? We'll have some questions to get to there. But of course, you know I can't go too long without having you scratch my itch. It is consensual scratching. My wife is okay with it, so no worries, no questions there. But I feel like it's been almost 5 minutes since we've checked in on the transfer portal. Been a little longer now. We took a couple of days away, I suppose, since we have dove into that. But I know there are some antsy Red Raiders out there awaiting the next dose of action. And what maybe is making this a little more anxious, I suppose, as a fan, Chris, is the fact that you're down to your last spot or two, considering whether or not you're going to leave one of these open or not. So the next ad, whatever it is going to be a really big one, a really important one, because the space is lessening for any ads at all, right?
Yeah, there's just a variety of different ways this could go. I think the cleanest and best way for Texas Tech is for you to land JT Toppin. I think it's pretty clear that he's been kind of top target, top of mind awareness, best fit for a while. I think there was some time there where it didn't necessarily look like it was going to happen, whether it be UT or whether it be NBA or whatever. And you still, are still kind of the NBA Sharks are still circling. And I think he recently worked out for a couple of NBA teams this week, a couple of days ago. And all it takes is one team. And, we've kind of talked about this some, but, you have to be in the first round to get guaranteed money. Sometimes teams or general managers will make those promises back in the first round or whatever. Say, stay in the draft. If you're there at 28, 22, whatever the number may be, we will take you. Sometimes that spills over into the second round. Hey, we promised we will guarantee you a contract if you stay in and you're there at 35 or whatever. But anything after the first round is it's a total crapshoot. Non-guaranteed. Then you're dealing with the foreign players and all that stuff too. That because there's only, I think, 58 players that get picked here, which is not very many, and even far fewer than that actually make it. But as we wait on, I think the date is May the 29th. It's going to be mid to early next week whenever they have to declare, I'm in the draft, I'm getting out. And I think JT Toppin is the apple of Texas Tech's eye, and not just because I think he's exactly what we've been talking about. He's a four-man that can play the five a little bit. He's athletic. He scores and rebounds. He's not a perimeter guy. He's an interior guy and an athletic guy that can get up and down the floor. He's a plus defender and all those things. I think he's very much a fringe NBA guy right now, hence the reason that we're having this conversation. All it takes is one team, but I think if he decides he's not going to the draft, I think you're in really, really good shape. And So say that were to happen, I think you just fill out the rest of the roster as best you can. I don't think you're going to see any other big ticket items and, things like that, like huge additions. And again, you always add the caveat, that things can change. But I think you're kind of, all in on somebody like JT Toppin. Are there backup plans if an NBA team, really likes him? Absolutely. You have to recruit like you're not getting him. And I think as Grant put it earlier this week, you need size. That's what they're looking for. They know they need some size in the paint and not just a traditional 5-man. They want some versatility, and that's why Toppin is such the perfect fit, because he kind of blurs the lines there on what he can do, and he creates a lot of versatility with your rotation and your starting lineup. And you can go big, you can go small, you can spin him up, spin him down. You can do some different things with him, and that's why he's such a good fit. And there's other options at the combine too. I think a lot of people have talked about Jalen Wells.
Yeah,
he's more of the problem with him as it relates to, he doesn't really fix what you need. He's more of a 3-man. You have a lot of those guys. You have a lot of. Grant talked about this too. You have a lot of. He's more of he's 6'7" but he's a shooter. And Grant went out of his way to talk about this past week about, we got Kerwin, we got D5, we got Chance. These guys all average right around 40% from 3. And so, do you want to bring in somebody that's going to take some of their shots? I don't know. I would say that even if you didn't get Toppin, you did get Wells, you still need to address, that size component. Because Jalen Wells hasn't really fixed what I think you're looking for, what I think you feel like is a final piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So
I just would say, don't get yourself talked into any one scenario being like, this is what's going to happen or else. The lines get blurred here. There's different things, but I just, it's about chemistry and locker room and need and all that. And everybody, I think, on your team is well aware, because Grant's talked about it repeatedly, about we need some size. We need somebody that can help us on the glass, and somebody can help us on the interior, and somebody can help us with being more versatile with our lineups. And that's why I think somebody like JT Toppin is such an ideal fit, if you can somehow pull that off. And if you do, you're going to feel really good about life. I'm going to tell you right now.
Well, I do appreciate your suggestion to not get tied into any one scenario. I will politely decline that suggestion. I am tied in. It's Toppin or bust. And if we go bust, I'm going down to Broadway. I'm finding a Toyota Scion to turn over and maybe burning a Lime scooter. So that's just me. I just wanted to let you know where I stood.
That's a great Final Four memory. I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I remember Dan Pope was the mayor at the time, and he was kind of around the team in some spurts, and he's like, we've been on the phone all morning trying to figure out what the heck's going on, or trying to get that squared away. But the fans were excited. Somebody's car got turned over. There was maybe some flames and all that. Yeah. But it came from the heart, though, right? Yeah. Everybody was excited. And again, they say act like you've been here before. Guess what? Yeah. We hadn't.
Had no idea. Yeah. And who's to say if we make it back there, we can't go again, turn over another Toyota Scion. Actually, knew who the guy was whose car got turned over, and it was just kind of a trade-up plan. I think he was one of those chanting, turn it over, and then boom, go fund me the next morning. Hey, my Scion got turned over. Let's go ahead and raise $35,000. Even though it was just a Scion, I need $35,000 for the next one. I don't know how that worked out for him.
And wasn't that like all? Didn't they start putting like Lime scooters on there too?
We got some scooters burning. Yeah. Maybe a piece of furniture. I'm not sure if there was a couch involved somewhere. We went mountaineering.
A couch.
Yeah, whatever we could find at that point in time. But yes, I will go ahead and go insane, I guess. I'm marrying myself to this one scenario and not leave room for any other. But I do appreciate you giving me the option, I suppose. I'm kind of curious, though, because what you're running down there has been sort of floating around in my head as far as these options are concerned, to sort of look like this. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. And you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs, slam dunks, and all in between, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what's the holdup? Get in the mix now on all the action by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If there are only a couple of spots left, and because I think we're sitting on 2, if I'm not mistaken, is it 3?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so if there's 3 spots left, I almost feel like if it was a miss on Toppin, and I'm not trying to suggest that, I'm just brainstorming, possible scenarios. If it was a miss there, then I almost feel like that could lead to you possibly using those spots differently otherwise, because like you're talking about there, you're not addressing the primary need at that time, at least not yet, which is size. So obviously it remains very, very fluid, which is not breaking news to anyone, but it could really adjust your shopping list one way or another, depending upon how this transfer from New Mexico goes. Is that right? Am I feeling it out right?
I think that's fair. That's why I say you just have to be careful about getting yourself talked into any sort of ironclad scenario on exactly how this will go. I think you could pivot several different ways here. I think, if you listen to what Grant said this past week, it was, we need size, and was asked, along the lines of, will you fill all your spots? Do you hold any? And I think his comment was, we will try to fill them, and I think they will. However, and that's the key, is we're not going to force anything. We're not going to, square peg round hole this deal. We're not going to add somebody just to put a body in a uniform. At that point, it needs to be worth your while. It needs to be something you maybe don't have, or somebody you're interested in that looking to develop or can help you right away. And otherwise, they'll hold it. But I'd be willing to bet you that of the 3 spots left, somebody in that 3 spots is going to be able to play for you and play immediately at the 4 or 5 spot. And then the next spot is a maybe on if they can be somebody that you factor in right now, or somebody that, is maybe a back end of the rotation guy. I mean, that could go a variety of different ways, but because you have to understand, you have NIL factored in here. You have, minutes and roles. You also have to look at your guys in your locker room that you've kind of talked to and said, hey, this is kind of how we envision this deal. And like, you bring somebody in here and it's like, hey man, remember what we told you? Well, we're and that part is just, so all of that factors in. And that's why Grant and these guys have to be very particular and careful with what they're adding and what they bring in and all those things, because it's you could potentially run into chemistry issues, or you could frustrate one of your return. I mean, there's like I said, variety of different things. Who knows? Only he has a good feel for what's out there, what they need, what's a match, and then when you start factoring in NIL into it and what this player's wishes are. Hey man, I'm not coming there to sit the bench, or I'm coming here to play, or I'm more than okay with trying to earn everything I get. So that's why I'm trying to just paint it's a muddy picture, but it's a picture nonetheless of kind of how the variety of ways this could go based on what your wants are versus what's available versus what that player that you may be looking at, what their wishes are. And is that if there's a match, then maybe there is something. But I think that, as he put it, we'll try to fill them. However, so you just have to remember the however part. But
there's always the however.
Somebody's going to be able to come in here and get added to the Frederico and EY, part of this deal. And you've got Devin Cambridge, who you can, last year that was kind of the small ball 5 that they played, and there's some versatility there. But I just think that hey, we've been through the Big 12, is what he said, talking about Coach McCaslin, and we know what we need. We need some size and things like that. And that's what you're going to end up with one way or the other. And I think you would love for it to be JT Toppin. But if not, you're going to have to go find it elsewhere, whether it's somebody else from the combine that decides not to stay in the draft, or somebody else that's in the portal that you've been trying to keep warm. And that's also the game you're playing too. You're trying to recruit, but you don't necessarily have a spot to offer because you don't know if that's taken up by somebody else, but yet you're trying to keep players warm and engaged and interested without going all the way with them. You know what I mean? And so that part is it's just a giant game, but they're recruiting every day, and you have to recruit like you're not going to end up with JT Toppin. That's just how you have to do it.
Yeah, it reminds me of a buddy in junior high trying to he had a couple of options to ask a girl to the dance. And I was there with him for emotional support when we were out in the vehicle to get some privacy. And he was pulling out the bag phone. It's back in the bag phone day. Like, all right, I'm going to call this chick. Get me amped up. Let's get amped up. Let's get amped up. Calls her, secures a date to the dance. Then, I don't know, maybe like 2, 3, 4 days later, a more promising option shows up. And he tried to pull this off, tries to double back, get out of the first, and get a commitment from the second. And of course, what does he wind up with? Goose egg. He winds up with a goose egg. So it's a balancing act. Hopefully Coach McCaslin can pull it off better than my buddy did back in, like 1997 as a 13-year-old or whatever. I think maybe he'd be a little more seasoned, but I get what you're saying. I mean, it's kind of a delicate balance to strike.
But I think connecting some dots here, I think that, the JT Toppin part of this equation is exactly why you didn't really go all in on Great Osobor. You just didn't. And I don't know if you really wanted to go that route anyway with what it ended up costing and all that. But I think it was always I think we'd still rather have our guy from Dallas that we know that played at New Mexico. But it's just tricky, and you're trying to do what's best, and you operate with information you have at the time, and it's a juggling act. But we'll just kind of see, and this is why you always just want to caution fans, and it's hard. Judge it after it's done, but people love the day-to-day, the minute-to-minute, the riding the wave, the frustration, the happiness, the angst, the whatever. You can't tell people to be patient that like riding the wave with it, but that's just kind of. But we will know something one way or the other, definitive, I think, midweek next week when the NBA draft declaration date comes and goes.
Yeah, the 29th will be on Wednesday for those looking ahead.
Yeah, that's when this thing really gets kind of moving and wrapped up, or you get some closure one way or the other here.
And another terrific, healthy, fruitful for our psyche suggestion from Chris Level to judge the final picture, but maybe one you also want to decline again and take the other out and go ahead and judge it minute by minute, hour by hour. I'm freaking out. You, not me. Not talking about me personally, of course. Before we leave this subject, I was just kind of curious, Chris, as we know how heavily the NIL factors into this. And we also know the restrictions that are in place between like a university versus a collective, what a head coach can say or can't say, and what an assistant can say, the scary word enticement, all these things. But I'm kind of curious whether it's what you know about Texas Tech or what you would expect from other programs in the Big 12 and across the country. Do you think that most set out and they know I've got this dollar amount to work with? I'm sure there's got to be some room as well. Like, hey, if this guy comes into the picture and we got to bump it up a little bit, it's not like set in stone. Or is it more set in stone than maybe I expect? And so when you really get down to the nitty gritty of trying to round out this thing, you're like, dude, I got $20 left to spend. I can't buy a $25 cantaloupe. And if you're buying a $25 cantaloupe, then you need psychiatric help. But that was the only example I could come up with. You know what I'm saying? First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite events again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals. And I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And of course, it's always at the lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that last beer at the tailgate at your own pace because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. They give you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast and easy, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed.
I think most collectives, and I think Cody Campbell talked about this in one of those interviews, and you know this to be fact, and he's kind of gone around the state and been at various speaking engagements for Matador Club purposes, and I think Grant and Joey McGuire have both been in attendance at a lot of these and explained there's real money attached to this. It's not just coming out of thin air. People are stepping up, but I think what you're asking is. I think, and Cody's talked about this publicly and not really privately, but at these speaking engagements where there's not, a TV camera there, I guess. You try to operate on you set up a budget and you try to operate within that budget. And then you try to, that's Grant and like Kellen Buffington and some of those people trying to organize that. That's Joey McGuire and James Blanchard trying to organize that internally. But there's typically you have kind of a lump sum and kind of spend it how you think is best. And does that budget get tweaked along the way? I mean, and this is nationwide. Yeah. I think there's always exceptions. There's always gray area. There's always things that come up, and I think that you have to be willing to just go back to the word pivot. You have to be willing to pivot a bit, and then you need maybe you need somebody else to step up even more than what you thought. I mean, and so because I tell you what has happened, like this basketball cycle, for example, I think the Kentucky job, and I think Calipari going to Arkansas, and I think a lot of that got a lot of this out of whack a bit. Just because of certain people and certain jobs being open, and then you just start looking at the merry-go-round, and maybe you're going to have this to a certain extent every cycle, but that was just a job that caused a lot of movement in a lot of places, and dollar figures were thrown around, whether real or not, I don't know, but I think that kind of caused some of these numbers to be out of whack, or reportedly to be out of whack. Maybe is the best way to say it, because nobody really knows. I mean, that's why it was such a bizarre occurrence when you see that Great Osobor was reported nationally that he got $2 million, highest paid guy in the country, and all those things, and that was you hadn't seen a lot of that, and so a lot of it's hearsay, a lot of it's people fishing back and forth trying to figure out what are you really offering. Well, this is what and nobody really knows.
Well, I think you've pointed out before that oftentimes the ones that know are those head coaches or members of their staff. Oh, hey, I make this comment about what I know this guy got or what this guy was asking for. And even then it can be some hearsay or secondhand info that may not be quite on the money as far as the truth. But I got to tell you, I may be just a sicko enough or just twisted enough in the head. I'm kind of enjoying this time of year. I got to be honest. And I imagine if we weren't following or rooting for a program that had been competitive in this space, it may not be as enjoyable. And I know there's plenty of you out there who are just sickened and nauseated by this entire thing. And please, we'll love to continue to hear from you in the YouTube comments. But I got to tell you, it has kind of become I'm not saying I look forward to this time of year, but I don't know about you, man, but April and May are a hell of a lot more interesting to me, at least.
Oh, well,
than they used to be in that regard.
From a news cycle standpoint or just following your program, I think there's more to follow. Yeah, because of this, I think there's no doubt. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Cowan, if you're pretty much a diehard basketball fan, you didn't know, if you're a Tech fan and you follow the sport generally, you weren't watching Elijah Hawkins, Kevin Overton, people like that, Frederico. You weren't, but this is who you ended up with. So it's kind of fascinating when you at the end of every season and you see there's going to be players that leave, and you're like, okay, well, who are we going to end up with? Because you're not real sure how it's ever going to look. And I'm guessing most people aren't just everybody knows him now and knows of him and knows probably everything there is to know about him, but back in early March, the general fan, they didn't know JT Toppin. They didn't know what he was about. They didn't know what New Mexico was doing. They didn't know
see him until the tournament.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And so I think that part is kind of fascinating. But this is just the harsh reality, folks. And I think basketball has probably been affected the most because And we knew this was going to be the case when NIL came into place. Basketball players on the men's side were going to be the most rewarded because think about it. Football players, there's a helmet. There is, a lot of times you don't know who these guys are. You just see a name on the back of a jersey number. Maybe you kind of have a feel for the quarterback or another star player because you see them some and all that. But basketball players, you see them 30-plus times a year. You know their face, their body language, their whatever they've got going on. You feel like you kind of know these folks because they're a lot more visible.
Well, and also one guy can really affect the fortunes.
Yep. And you're trying to – if you can get the right 8 or 9 guys or just the one guy, it totally changes the entire dynamic of your team. Whereas if you go spend a bunch of money on a quarterback, if he doesn't have anybody to throw to, if he doesn't have anybody that can protect him, it doesn't really matter. And so it's a little more evened out on the football side of it. Yeah. But the football part of it is like you got to compensate for a whole giant, huge roster, and you need a lot of these pieces.
Yeah,
it's just not that there's one more, a lot more valuable than the other kind of thing. But
well, and of course, like we talked about on the show yesterday, that number could be shrinking depending upon when you're taking this Very conversation true. In. But I don't know if you saw this the other day, and I guess it was kind of a joke at one point. May not be so much of a joke anymore, but. I saw some conversation happening on Twitter about some programs that had already put into place, and maybe we're just now kind of acknowledging it. And I don't mean like officially, but this word was kind of getting out. Handshake line chaperones, supervisors, monitors, who's being recruited right after the final whistle. I mean, that is bizarre to think about. We used to joke about it all the time. Like, hey, make sure you give this guy an extra long dap in the handshake line. But, I guess it's happening to a more serious degree maybe than I thought.
That's been reported because there was some, I don't know if you want to call it like a convention or a gathering with a lot of, director of football operations type folks. There was some media that were in attendance with these things, and everybody kept it anonymous. So you kind of found out that a director of operations for football from this league, but you don't know who or what school he was at. But a lot of these comments made it into the ether from via Football Scoop and some places like that. And that's what a lot of folks talked about is, I think that a lot of that stuff is monitored. A lot of that stuff really, really happens. A lot of that, and some of it you just can't prevent. Right. I mean, there's people that know people and work together with whether it be assistants or, hey, I recruited you out of high school and I know you. There's just all kinds of dynamics that come into play in a post-game scenario. But
get a little head turn looking somebody's way.
But that's reality. I mean, that really is. And also, here's the other thing that I think you've seen some articles written about this recently. Remember football assistant coaches, and I think basketball assistant coaches too, that made their name because they were a really, really good recruiter. Maybe not necessarily a great position coach, but a really, really good recruiter.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's lessened a lot. I think that now you almost say, if I could pick one or the other, I'd rather have somebody that is a much better developer and X's and O's coach, because the recruiting it kind of gets spun down to NIL and to some of those kinds of things. It's not about building a relationship with mom. Now that helps, but I just think there's a lot of folks over the years that have made their name off just being this big time salty recruiter. And it's like, they didn't know if that football was puffed or stuffed, they just could get players. They could get players. And now it's like everybody can get players because the money and all these different things, but you got to be able to squeeze as much out of them when you can, and you can't miss. So
may still need to convince mama, but she may be looking for something different than just an assurance her baby boy's going to get taken care of. Ricky Rose's daddy needs a new tractor. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. You may try to police the handshake line, but it's just human instinct. Chris Level walks down the sidewalk. You think your wife ain't going to look? You can police it all you want to. Put blinders on her, but it's just human instinct. Before we get out of here really quickly, Chris, just a few minutes. I'm not going to let you respond to that one. Just a few minutes left. We're within 100 days, my man. 99 to be exact. If you're listening to this on Friday, kickoff is coming up just around the corner, August 31st for Joey McGuire and company. But a little over 60 days, 2 months or so till we get into fall camp. I was just kind of curious, like, what is on the calendar for Joey McGuire and his staff over the summer? And how much do you think 99 days will do for an AC joint? Take whichever one you want.
So yeah, I'll be trying to succinct here. I think from what's left for the summer, I think that they'll mix in the little time off that they do get in July. That's the one, month where it really, really shuts down. I think you'll get into, as we get closer to June, you'll start to see a lot of visit weekends. There's 2 or 3 weekends in there that are heavy visit weekends, which is my brain is not used to it. These are some of your high profile visits. These are this is when you're really putting your best foot forward with your program. And the town and the campus in a lot of places are essentially empty. And yet but this is the calendar. And because this is when the visits can get set up because of the early signing date. And I think that, so that's really what June will be the bulk of. And obviously Joey and his staff will have, close to, if not a new building to show them in some aspects.
Nothing slowing down over the next 2 months in that regard, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. But then in July, you've got Big 12 Media Days in Vegas. And, that there'll be some time off for his assistants and his staff. And they'll report somewhere in, kind of mid to late July and get going. And then the team reports and away you go. As far as Barron goes, I do know that Barron was in, I believe it was in Florida a week ago, and I don't know how many of these sessions he's going to have, but I mean, he was throwing with quarterbacks, like starting quarterbacks from the following schools with this kind of, I don't know, therapist / coach, but you had A&M there, you had Kansas there, you had Miami there, you had Arizona State there, you had Florida State there. Yeah, there's 6 or 7 guys that he's like starting quarterbacks that he's at this, and he's, as I understand it, throwing. And I think learning how to deal with this injury and try to, whether it's strength and conditioning, whether to let's adjust some things so we can kind of let this thing heal. And I don't think he's like throwing like crazy. This is all observed and, with the medical stamp on it, let's put it that way, like trying to get him right and trying to strengthen and train and be smarter with movements and all these things and not do more harm and damage to it. And I think there'll be a lot of gaps here where he's not, doing anything. But yeah, he was with a lot of quarterbacks at this situation, and I think that'll happen another time or 3, give or take, kind of deal. And then there's some mandatory downtime for him too. But that's kind of where you're at. But look, if you had a game tomorrow, he'd be ready to go. He'd be your starter. He could play. What percentage is he at? Only he could really talk about that. But again, you don't have a game tomorrow. It's not till August 31st.
Yeah, but the work continues, and some of those June visits obviously going to be highly impactful as far as the roster moving down the road. So, hey, if they need any help from the Locked On Texas Tech boys, just let us know. I can get there on campus, be walking these boys through this ghost town of a campus in the middle of the summer, but paint a picture, be like, son, this is where a beautiful woman will be standing a few months from now. And yeah, there's the Mass Comm building, but there'll be some really, really good looking ladies standing right here. We've all seen it before. Okay. It'll come back around again. And hopefully you will too on the other side of the weekend. If you're going to have a long one, hope you enjoy it, and we'll join you on the other side as well. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man.
Be safe out there on this holiday weekend, people. Try to get some downtime mixed in. Go to a movie, get by the pool, something. I don't know. Maybe a little downtime probably be good for everybody. School year just ended and all those things. But, yeah, enjoy the lengthy holiday weekend, folks, and we'll talk to you early next week.
Appreciate you guys being out there. Would appreciate it even more if you get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And, of course, the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. Get in that YouTube comment section, dust up. Appreciate all those that do on the regular. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.